What's up, guys? Welcome to a new day. I'm Stephanie Ryder, and this is the 365 Shares podcast. It's January 21st, 2024, and this is the 21st episode of the 365 Shares podcast. Today's topic is relationships, and the Big Red Book says, we remember we can talk, trust, and feel instead of control, isolate, and fume. Relationships can be different in recovery. This passage references the don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel rules, which we learn growing up in dysfunctional families because we're not supposed to acknowledge the craziness. We're not supposed to tell anyone else outside of the home about the craziness, and we're certainly not supposed to have feelings about it. But this extrapolates that rule into our relationships and says that when we don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel, we instead move to control, isolate, and fume. So imagine a situation where you've been angry with someone, and I've certainly been in these situations many times, and you can't talk to them about it, either because they refuse to talk to you or because in my case, sometimes I don't feel like I can talk about it in a healthy way because I'm so angry. Or maybe, you just don't want to talk about it. You can't trust that you can have an open dialogue with this person, that they will be receptive to what you have to say, and that you can move forward to repair the relationship, because not everyone is able to repair after a fight. And you certainly can't share your feelings about them. So instead, you're just going to try to do things to control the situation. You are going to isolate yourself because the only way to protect yourself is to not be in contact with that person, and you're going to fume. You're just going to sit and be angry about it because there's no way to get to a healthy resolution where you are heard and you allow dialogue for the other person and something positive comes about as a result of this argument, and both parties agree that they're going to try to do better going forward. And this passage talks about survival traits that we learned in childhood and that were required for us to survive in severely dysfunctional homes as children, but become very maladaptive as adults, especially if we go out in the world. Say you move away from your hometown, you go to college, you get a job, you make new friends, you have coworkers, and suddenly your reactions to situations seem very different than the reactions that other people are having. You seem to be an outlier either in people-pleasing, in passive-aggressive behavior, in overtly aggressive behavior. Suddenly, things aren't working for you. Or maybe you fall in love with the love of your life and the relationship isn't going well. Either there's a lot of secrecy and you don't have true intimacy, or you're fighting a lot, or there's a breakup. Maybe you get back together and break up and get back together and break up. Just any of these problems. And the Strengthening My Recovery book says through ACA, we can work on these survival traits that no longer serve us and try to develop new traits and allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to have intimacy with people. And this could be in any type of relationship, romantic, family, coworker, friend, anything. Basically just saying we all have to get to that point where we realize that what we've been doing, just sort of white knuckling our way through life, isn't working anymore. And if we want our relationships to improve, we're going to have to make some changes. And that means taking a hard look at our coping mechanisms, at our maladaptive behaviors. And it means working to identify our true self and bringing our true selves to the relationships, because that is the way to have intimacy. To share yourself, the true version of yourself, with another person is the best way to get them to share the true version of their self with you. And that's really intimacy. I'm Steph, and this is my share. The affirmation for today is, on this day, I have the courage to break old patterns that keep me from deeper connections with the people in my life. I have to be honest and say the first thing I thought about when I read this passage was my sister, which is very codependent of me because we should always think about ourselves first when we're reading any kind of passage, but sometimes we think about other people first. And I don't think that my sister and I are so different at all in the ways that we adapted to our families. We're just in different stages of our life. She's younger, and I feel like I had my big traumatic rock bottom moment or experiences when I was going through my miscarriage and my separation and my divorce and the death of my cat. And I just wasn't getting the reactions from people that I wanted. I really wanted everyone to be so shocked and horrified by what my ex-husband was doing. And I think some people definitely were. I got some of that, but I also was getting some weird responses from people. A lot of responses of people sort of making it seem like they weren't going to say anything, but they knew about the situation and they weren't going to tell me what they knew about the situation, but there was another layer of it that they knew that maybe I didn't know. And that paranoia, some of the fault might be with me. I had to look really hard at myself, and my therapists were looking really, were really scrutinizing me as well. And to understand why I got into the relationship, why it progressed the way it did, from going really well to deteriorating to just basically evaporating into thin air almost. And with that comes the questions of like, well, what are your parents like? What's your family like? And all those things that if you're a good psychoanalyst, you drill into because you understand the connection between childhood and adulthood. But the reason I thought of my sister is because I just haven't seen anything happen in her life that's made her look at any of her actions or her behaviors or her mindsets that makes her think maybe there's a healthier way for me to do things. Maybe there's a happier way for me to live. That's hard for me because I'm trying to maintain a relationship with her that works around what I think are the unhealthy ways that she interacts with me and the things that are hurting her physical health. But this passage just really makes me think that she's really stuck to these coping mechanisms that were required in childhood, and not only childhood, but also adulthood. I mean, we don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, very codependent, very controlling, used information about people to triangulate them and figure out how she felt about it. And if it didn't make her feel good, then she would try to manipulate those people into living their lives a different way. But of course, she didn't want to ever look like she was doing that directly because she knew that was bad. So she would try to do it indirectly through other people in the family. So up until a few years ago, the entire family was run by someone who was very, very committed to this codependent family system. And my sister was one of the closest people with my grandmother. And they really were in a closed feedback loop where they were just reinforcing each other's thoughts, behaviors, words, actions all the time. So there's no one to really challenge and say, hey, this isn't working, or hey, this isn't healthy, because it was healthy for them. It was normal for them. It was what they knew. And in their experience, they felt that their controlling situations was required for an outcome that wasn't a complete disaster. And I obviously was raised in the same family, so I was a really big part of that mindset. And I had a lot of feelings of betrayal when I started learning specifically all the behaviors of my family that were dysfunctional and everything that I had inherited and that I was carrying on, because of course I thought that everything I was doing was right as well. And if you watch the Kardashians, there has been a lot of drama the past season between Kourtney and Kim. There were a lot of hurt feelings about business deals that were made. But I think a lot of it really comes down to gotten into therapy. I'm sure she's been in therapy for years. She is in a healthy relationship. She has her own family. She has a new baby. Like, you just need to figure out why you're driven, like why you're like this. What are you searching for? You need to do your work. Don't we think that this pattern is unhealthy? And I've been in Kourtney's place where I'm maybe not the first person to be in therapy in the family, but someone who suddenly realizes that a lot of what we've been doing is wrong and like runs back to everyone. Is like, hey, you guys, like all of this is wrong. Like, did you know that all of this is wrong? But nobody wants to hear that what they've been doing is wrong. And when there are strength in numbers, because you're one of the few people who's trying to point out that certain therapeutic circles, 12-step groups, etc., think that this behavior might be unhealthy, everyone that's committed to this pattern of behavior is going to gang up on you. So I understand how frustrating it is to go up against the family and to be like, hey guys, this is wrong. There's another way to do this. And I understand how it feels to be the person who's still committed to the behavior pattern, who says, this works for me. If I don't do this, this laundry list of horrible things will certainly happen. So I have no choice but to do all these things. And I know that it's hard either way. It's hard to be in recovery. It's hard to be having difficulty all the time because of your unhealthy coping mechanisms, and to be stressed and to not be taking good care of yourself and to have health problems and anxiety and depression. It's hard all around. But I like that the book brings this back to relationships, because that to me has always been the most important part of my life. My relationships have always been more important to me than career, fitness, than any other thing in my life. It's always, my romantic relationships, my friendship relationships, my family relationships. Everything else just sort of stems from my desire to be a healthy participant in healthy relationships that are ongoing. So I like that it comes back to relationships. And I like that it specifically says these unhealthy patterns are the things that are keeping us from healthier relationships. Because if you're someone who is so worried about how much it's going to hurt to quote unquote do your work, to go in therapy, to re-examine family patterns, if you're someone who's going to be facing a stone wall of people in your family who do not want to change and do not want you to tell them that they need to change, and not only that, they're going to tell you that you have been the problem the entire time and you're the one that needs to change, even though you already are changing, but they want you to change back to their version of things. And I have experienced that. But if you really want healthy, lasting relationships beyond just it looks good on paper, or this is like a great Instagram relationship, or everyone thinks that we're doing so well, maybe you have like a great financial relationship, but there are a lot of secrets between you and your partner or your spouse. There are so many reasons to get healthy, but I think for me, the number one reason is that it allows me to attract and maintain relationships with healthy people who are going to support me and uplift me and who are not going to abandon me.